If you were a classic OG Cartoon Network kid like me, then you probably recognize the face of this adorable pink pooch. Courage first appeared in a 1996 short called The Chicken from Outer Space, which was later adapted into a full series on Cartoon Network. Now, despite the surface level simplicity of Courage, it's actually a very bizarre show. Now, for those who aren't as aware of the lore of this universe, allow me to explain. Courage is a farmland pup who lives with his, mom, I guess, Muriel Bagg, and her husband Eustace Bagg is like borderline abusive, kind of, and he unironically looks like my real world grandpa. Courage is someone who doesn't really have the most confidence. This is due to the fact that Eustace not only insults him and beats him pretty much every day, but he even wears this big scary mask and scares him all the time. It's even shown in the intro. And if that weren't enough, the town of Nowhere is frequently plagued by criminals and bad guys, which could range from just about anything from a goofy, stereotypical Cajun fox to, oh my god, what the heck is that thing? Every episode follows a bit of a formula. Something would happen and a spooky specter is provoked that would then capture the old people, so Courage would have to face his fears and save the day. Oh yeah, and sometimes Eustace doesn't make it out alive. When I first revisited Courage, I wasn't sure if I'd finish it, let alone cover it on this channel, but the more I kept coming back to it, the harder I found it to stay away. There was something about this show that just had me hooked. No matter what I did, I just can't tear my eyes away from it. But before I really, dig into the meat of things, I want to talk about a few more surface level elements. For one thing, Courage is very cute, but at the same time he's not the, stereotypical, overly cutesy thing that a lot of us are desensitized to nowadays. And I feel like just his actions and the way his voice is sometimes are part of what makes him feel so likable. Courage would definitely not be the same without the voice of Marty Grabstein. The world of Courage has a lot of simplistic character designs and real-world images for backgrounds. It gives the whole series this feel of simplicity, like the feeling it was made on a low budget. And I'm not really sure whether or not it was, but it certainly feels that way. It's just oozing with nostalgic coziness, and it never really feels like the creators are phoning it in. And the same applies to both the horror and the comedy. The jokes in Courage are very, slapstick and over the top. I feel like they're never too obnoxious or anything to the point where it takes you out of it. And at the same time, there are also a lot of, legitimately very surprising jokes that really do catch you off guard. There are some episodes of Courage that were surprisingly very scary, but I feel like the show overall is really nowhere near as scary as it's hyped up to be, but that's not really a bad thing either. Courage to me feels like the right amount of scary for a kid show. I'm not just saying that because, I don't think it's scary now, but even when I was younger, I never really got all that creeped out by it. And to put things into perspective, the type of shows that I found scary in this era were Billy and Mandy and Invader Zim. I know I've already talked about Billy and Mandy on this channel before, but seriously, believe me when I say, there were times it got under my skin. And I want to clarify that I'm not just trying to throw shade or anything here. I'm not trying to say that they're bad shows and that Courage is the superior one. I feel like Courage is much better at doing horror that's specifically for kids. And can we acknowledge just how actually gruesome this show was? There's so many organs and limbs and bones and stuff, and it's surprising, but I like it actually. Now, returning to Courage as a character, he's very important because of the way he functions with the rest of the series. Every episode has the exact same moral. Courage doesn't just care about Muriel, he cares about everyone. He's helped his enemies when they're not trying to kill him before, and he even rescued Eustace on many occasions. Really, Courage is just a nice person, yet terrible things keep happening to him. Him and his family never really deserve any of the awful things that happen to them, maybe except for Eustace, but that's what just makes you root for him even more. Most episodes both begin and end with Courage and Muriel safely together. I say most because there was that one time with the evil carrot and then, everyone in the world died. And that's because no matter how hard things get, Courage just remembers who he loves, why he's fighting, and that is what motivates him to keep going. And that's why the ending to every episode can feel just so darn satisfying. Now, the series doesn't really have that many one-parter episodes, which is pretty disappointing because I think the one-parters were interesting. The episode The Mask is somewhat infamous, as the villain of this one wasn't your usual wacky mad scientist, but was instead an abusive boyfriend. And this episode featured 2 female characters who were later confirmed by John R. Dilworth, series creator himself, to be in a relationship. That's nice. The final episode of Courage is surprisingly very cathartic, which is something I never really expected. Now, the first half of the final episode focuses on Courage's origin story. After a visit to the veterinarian, Courage's biological parents are kidnapped and launched into space. But don't worry, they aren't forced to watch cheesy movies. This moment is the exact trigger that gave Courage his anxiety. Everything that has ever scared Courage in his entire life has all stemmed from this trauma. After being reminded of his parents, Courage is put into a catatonic state, where not even Eustace's tricks can snap him out. So Eustace and Muriel take him to the vet to get him checked out, and surprise, surprise, it's the same vet. When the parents find out about the veterinarian's scheme, he then decides to get rid of him the same way he got rid of Courage's other parents. This moment right here is Courage's greatest fear. But Courage doesn't just lay down and die. He already lost one family, and he refuses to lose another. So Courage defeats the veterinarian and blasts him off to space. It's then revealed that his parents and all the other dogs the veterinarian kidnapped are still alive and waiting for their revenge. Now this ending is really interesting because it shows us how Courage would react when faced with what is quite literally his worst fear. But even though the bad guy is beat and the day is saved, this still isn't the end. Enter Part 2, Perfect. Even after everything, Courage is still plagued by the thought of one day losing Muriel. And so, a figment of his imagination, or at least that's what I think it is, called the Perfectionist, tries to straighten Courage out. Except what the Perfectionist demands is impossible. Courage can't be perfect. But then a talking fish thing comes to life and tells Courage that he's not perfect. In fact, no one is, because perfection doesn't actually exist. You're perfect because you're imperfect. And so when the Perfectionist asks Courage to draw a perfect number 6, he instead draws a very abstract, creative, weird-looking number 6. And that proceeds to fucking kill her. And so the series ends with the family enjoying a nice meal together in a calm, quiet house. The end. Now, I respect the absolute hell out of the Courage finale. You see, his parents are still alive, but he never reunites with them, because in the real world, that sometimes just doesn't work out. And at the same time, even though he does improve by the end of the series, he still never really overcomes his fear. And that's because trauma isn't really something you can just change overnight. It's not something you can just magic away. It's something that you have to learn to live with. And that's what I like about it. I feel like so many stuff today kind of refuses to acknowledge that. And I like how, since it was the finale, they were able to explore new art styles. I think the crayon drawings and the flashbacks really emphasize the innocence of baby Courage. Now, even though parts 1 and 2 do an amazing job closing out Courage's character and story, this actually isn't the end of Courage. He would later return in a 2014 CG short called The Fog of Courage, which was apparently meant to start an entire CG Courage show, but I'm sure you could have guessed that it didn't really work out. Courage would also appear in 2021's Straight Outta Nowhere, Scooby-Doo Meets Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now here's the thing with the Scooby-Courage crossover. At first, it sounds like something that would make sense, but really in actuality, these two are polar opposites. Scooby-Doo is all about debunking myths and finding rational explanations for stuff. In Courage, shit just kinda happens. So for the first half of the movie, the gang continuously try and fail to explain the occurrences of nowhere, and it's hilarious! There's one scene where Katz is giving his stereotypical villain monologue, then the gang just straight up dogpile him and start tugging on his face because they refuse to believe that British cat boys are real. But then, in the second half of the movie, they actually do find an explanation for why Courage is the way that he is, and why the town of Nowhere is the way that it is. You see, not only is the explanation provided cliché, but it kind of completely falls apart the moment you apply it to the actual series. And look, I don't want to be that guy, but Anunnaki, talking animals, just saying. There were lots of Easter eggs, as one would expect, but it feels like there's so many it stops being genuine. Like at one point they even straight up use reused footage from the original series. And why would the mayor just randomly have a picture of Freaky Fred's girlfriend in this house? What? And look, those are just straight up screen grabs, what the hell? Oh, and is now a good time to mention John R. Dilworth wasn't even involved? Now, to be fair, we do get to see Eustace bust it down, and that is definitely a win in my book. I don't know, it's a very weird movie, there's some strange decisions here and there, but I think it did a pretty good job doing the characters and the humor. But either way, we got to see a long-retired character have a faithful return. This isn't the first time the Scooby-Doo movies have done this, and I really hope it isn't the last. And come on, just try to watch that opening intro without smiling. Now, I like the idea that a character like Courage can return after his show's end, but there have been talks of a Courage prequel, and I just think that's not a good idea. Courage has already taught us the lesson we needed to hear, and I really don't like the idea of him becoming another bloated, oversaturated franchise. In fact, Adventure Time producer Adam Muto once said that it's very likely there could be an Adventure Time reboot somewhere down the line. And come on, you can't do that. That's like trying to reboot Star Wars, or, well, I was gonna say Harry Potter, but, I think you can guess why I can't say that one. But what would they even do for a prequel? We've already seen his origin story twice. I just don't see the point in doing something like that. Now, sadly, in 2021, before the release of Straight Outta Nowhere, Thea White, the voice of Muriel Bagg, passed away. So let's have a moment of silence for Miss White. Now, I believe that Courage is a very timely series. Even though he is a dog, his struggles are very human. He's a character that anyone can sympathize and relate to. He taught us that courage isn't just not having fear, but taking action in the face of fear. Or as Courage himself would say, Oh, the things I do for love.
Hey, at least it's still a better movie than 2001: A Space Odyssey.